Good morning. As we are an international panel, it's going to be in English, just as a heads up. We are super thankful to be here with this important topic, and I'm very delighted to have 3 filmmakers who do very different kind of documentaries here today. And I'm going to introduce each of them shortly, and we are going to show a short extract of each film, and then we are going to sit down and start the conversation. So the first one I would love to introduce is Franz Böhm. He did in 2020 a beautiful film called Dear Future Children. You can watch it in the ARD and Arte Mediathek, and he just got a BAFTA for his short film Rock, Paper, Scissors. If you don't know what a BAFTA is, it's the most important British film award. So thank you very much, Franz, for being here. And then we have a short clip from Franz's film, Dear Future Children. Yes.
I ask myself if I am the right person to lead the movement.
We don't risk our future by protesting on the streets. Not going on the streets will risk our future way more.
That day when I got beat up, I feel like I couldn't do that anymore.
When they shoot us right in the face.
I fear to fail.
I'm very scared that they will know my name and my family's.
We already lost so many battles. We can't risk losing this now.
The next one I would love to introduce is Friedrich Moser. He's going to show a film at our film festival, which will take place in 2 weeks, called How to Build a Truth Engine, and it's an essay about how people mess with our minds and make us believe in things that are not real. So if we could also see a short clip of that one, it would be fantastic.
Es gibt Krieg zu Lande, zu Wasser und in der Luft. Der verheerendste Krieg von allen ist aber der Informationskrieg. Denn wenn wir den Zugriff auf die Wahrheit verlieren, verlieren wir unsere Zivilisation.
And the third one who flew in from London, as did Franz, is Havana Marking. Her film Undercover will be also shown at Documentaria in 2 weeks' time. It's a film about a deep undercover action of a young journalist for a beautiful British organization that I didn't know before, which is called Love Not Hate, trying to expose far-right networks. And we are also going to have a short glimpse into that film.
There are a number of rules you have to follow when going undercover. You need to know your story. Don't come across as too curious. You have to be patient. Let it come to you.
The far right are dangerous. Their ideas encourage violence even if they're not explicitly calling for it.
And that's something all of us want to stop.
So, please. So, as you have seen from all 3 film excerpts, all 3 films are quite a bit about truth and our perception of truth. And so that would be an open question to all 3 of you to start this panel, is how did the perception of truth in documentaries filmmaking change? And where do you see the challenges as filmmakers? Maybe we start with Havana, because you did this beautiful investigative film, really challenging.
So we, as you could see in that clip, we followed a journalist who had secret cameras. He was wearing secret cameras. And the film was an observational film following over a year period, a year's time. It wasn't a kind of current affairs film. It was definitely a film for cinema. but it was very important that we were obviously completely believable all the way through, and we had a huge legal department making sure that every single thing that was said was backed up and had different sources and could be relied on. You have, when you work with secret cameras, there's a huge number of rules that allow you to then broadcast that. But it's very hard work. But that does mean that the kind of truth is there. This isn't a journalist's opinion. It's not a newspaper idea. It is true. You know, they are saying what they're saying, and we see it. And they couldn't argue with it. Afterwards, one or two far-right people tried to say we had doctored the footage, changed the footage, used AI to manipulate their words. They didn't really say it. But ultimately, it was very clear they said everything they said. They couldn't argue with it. So for us, that was an incredibly important part of the story.
Just to give you an impression, they really used like spy. For me, it had very much of a spy feeling, and I was very interesting to see that that's actually happening and very eye-opening. They had button cameras, like hidden in buttons, hidden in clothes, like really going deep undercover. I think your main protagonist even legally changed his name to do that. So it was a deep covered up operation. In very opposite of it, Friedrich, your film is more of an essay. You're explaining the reasons why I believe things. You are telling an essay. How do you work with the term truth in your films?
Well, my film consists of different parts. One is the framing, which is information warfare. The second one is I have been following investigative journalists of the New York Times visual investigations team who are using a wide array of technologies to get the truth out about, like mass murders and crimes against humanity that can be used as a base for criminal investigations at the International Criminal Court. Then you've got the ICIJ, which is the organization that is behind the Panama Papers and similar investigations. Then I had computer scientists and narrative experts from UCLA and UC Berkeley who developed a software tool that can, in an automated way, find conspiracy theories online in unstructured texts, which means like in conversations happening online. And the most important part of my film, I think, is neuroscientists who show us how information is actually processed in our brain. And that has got to do a lot with why we fall so easily for disinformation and fake news. Because the way our brain works is to have shortcuts between detection of patterns, coming to completing the patterns, so those parts that we cannot see, coming to a conclusion in order to take some action. And that goes back to our reptile brain and our fight and flight mechanism from the old days when we were living in the woods. And we, from, let's say, traces on the floor, needed to come to a conclusion if there was an animal that could eat us or not. So that's the kind of stuff my film works. And I think documentary films are the marriage between journalism and filmmaking, and it's also a kind of gap in which we have to operate, because we want to be cinematic and we want to work with the tools that filmmaking provides us with, but then also there has to be some journalistic integrity at the base of it.
I think that's a very good continuation with Franz, because your film has this. Sorry?
No mistake, sorry.
No worries.
My microphone wasn't supposed to be on. Go on.
All fine. Beautiful interruption. Your film is that marriage of journalism, also somehow investigative, but very, very cinematic. Very, in a way, you sit there and you're absolutely sucked into the film because it really tells the story. How did you find the balance between showing the facts and using this very emotionalized style that you have?
First of all, huge pleasure to meet all of you, and many thanks for the invitation. Thank you also very much for these kind words. Perhaps just as a very, very quick overview, Dear Future Children, you've just seen a very small excerpt of it, is a 90-minute documentary, and we're following 3 young activists in Hong Kong, Uganda, and Chile, focusing very much on their challenges, their fears, and the sacrifices they have to make in order to keep up their activism. And I think the question, Anna, is extremely, extremely important, and we could probably talk about that for a very, very long time. And I will try to formulate my basic beliefs in just a few sentences. So first of all, I believe that cinema, especially today's cinema, is, for me at least, is always a dialogue and never a lecture. And what I mean by that, when it comes to Dear Future Children, when it comes to this film, is we're speaking about young, modern, global activism, which is obviously an extremely huge topic. And we're trying to contribute a very, very, very small part to that conversation, to that dialogue. And we want to make sure that this part that we're contributing is obviously factually correct, and obviously we've done the groundwork for that, and vetted the protagonists, had a very, very long production time with them. But at the end of the day, and I think everybody who tells you otherwise, I have a very strong opinion about this. The second you set up the camera and start filming, you are filming one side of the room and not the other. So that documentary, no matter how well researched it is only 90 minutes. Let it be 3 hours, then it's only 3 hours. So that can only be a small part of that larger debate. Sometimes, when we were screening the film, we had many great reactions, but we sometimes had people wondering, what do you want us to do now? We've shown us this film, so what's next? What's your agenda? And I think that's a very interesting question, that people were perceiving perhaps that film, or are perceiving films in general in that way, because perhaps our agenda is only to perhaps do even further research, because we are in no position to tell the audience on how to react, or how to act in the future. And I believe there is, because you've asked how truth changed in the recent years, I think there is a new trend that media makers, filmmakers, or influencers are perhaps entering the stage with a different mindset, which is a mindset of, this is my film, and this is the only truth that you need to know. There's no other valid information. And that obviously I would perceive as very, very dangerous.
Friedrich, you were nodding quite a bit. Would you like to add something on that? Would you agree with Franz?
Yes, I think, and I can't agree anymore, that it's really, you're just catching a glimpse of reality, which then you try to build into a narrative that reflects a deeper story that's ongoing, and that tries to seek a deeper truth that's hidden there. And I think what connects us as documentary filmmakers with journalism is it needs to be based on facts. So there needs to be a factual reality that's being pictured in our films. Do we have an agenda? Yes, we do have an agenda. I think each of us has got an agenda. In my case, one of the things, or let's say the kind of motto that I have as a filmmaker is, film is only the beginning. I think it is a beginning to start a conversation, and I also want to create impact. And with my most recent film, How to Build a Truth Engine, what we have done is I've gathered together with different professionals from the, I would say, information ecosphere, that are operating in the information ecosphere, to build tools and workshops for social media literacy and media literacy, because I think that's important. I think technology will not save us. We need to be aware that we are vulnerable, and we need to find ways of dealing with this vulnerability. We need to build resilience. So this is one way of how to react, or how to kind of further the agenda that I have. I think it's creating awareness. I think this is what we can do, actually.
Havana, I have now so many questions for you. I will start with one. I've seen your film the first time at the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam, Short ITFA. And I've seen the conversation that it started in the room, afterwards in the room when you and your two main protagonists were on the stage. Which is your reception on the film and how it starts a conversation, and the way there is this interaction between the screen and the audience?
Yeah, so I think the main thing that comes through is, and really, although there is a whole story and there's a whole factual story, and there's journalism and there's things that are uncovered, and we uncover a funding network that goes back to Silicon Valley, and we discover a European network that is in Germany and Denmark and UK, and it's all really frightening. Ultimately, what comes through, and what's the emotional things that come through, is the courage of the people in the film. And that has been a very inspiring thing to see, how audiences have reacted to that and seem to have also been inspired to find their own courage. I mean, I think that's the only thing that my main thing about the film is that we're telling a story, we're telling a big story, and the individual people in the film are working on those points, and we actually did stop the funding, like, as a result of the film and the investigation and stuff like that. But ultimately, you want the audience to be inspired to find their own ways to fight fascism, for example, in me. So I definitely have an agenda. I'm an anti-fascist. The people I film are anti-fascists. I want that message to come through. But it is absolutely 100% based on fact and truth.
We have now learned that you all three did very deep investigations in your film and worked on topics against the far right, on human rights issues. What I learned in the past is that filmmakers get more and more under the fire, like there are threats out there for documentary filmmakers. How did you deal with that? And how did you find a personal safety net to not back off? Or did you back off, which is fine as well? And how did that impact your film and the way you told the story? Maybe we start with Franz. I see him nodding a lot. I mean, you were working in Hong Kong. I guess we all know the situation in Hong Kong and how hard it is for the activists there. How was it filming in these three very different countries?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. And first of all, I do want to say, with Dear Future Children, obviously no one forced me or our team to make this film. So that was a completely voluntary decision. I think it's important to say, because everything that I'm now about to say about how we were perhaps treated as filmmakers, we've decided to go down this route, whereas obviously people living in Hong Kong and being faced with the political situation there did not have that same decision. So I just want to make that clear. There is, I think, because you've asked, did you back off? We didn't, but there is an incredibly high, dark number of film projects that we can't see that are not getting made because of the political attacks from political actors in different regions and in different political spectrums. I'm sure you can talk to us about the far right. In our specific case with Dear Future Children, it was the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who very actively tried to stop our project. And as young filmmakers, as independent filmmakers, our funding networks and our resources are obviously somewhat limited, which makes us pretty ideal targets. In our specific case, these attacks were conducted in a real variety of different levels. So there were hacking attacks on our bank accounts, on our email accounts, on social media and stuff like that. But then perhaps what is even more frightening is the more personal attacks over social media. Or to give you a really absurd example, even my grandparents in South Germany were targeted with stuff stapled on their front door at their house, which I'm sure you can imagine had a drastic effect. And to create this sort of basic fear, unfortunately, is very, very cheap and very simple. I mean, we are here at a conference about digital, about the internet and so on. So you can, I'm sure all of you know how easy it is to find out a lot about, let's say, myself. I'm sure all of you, within a few minutes, could find out, I don't know, my address or really, really personal information about my life. So then to create this basic fear is very, very simple, but obviously resisting that and protecting your team from that, again, is the very, very hard step. In our case, we had a brilliant collaboration with the Stanford and Harvard University in the United States, and we were doing our best to build a sort of 360 protection network around the project itself. We were able to trace back a lot of these attacks. We were able to sort of uncover some of these more nasty attacks. In some cases, we were able to sue the people who did attack the project in that way. And we are now working very hard to make that kind of technology accessible to the next generation of filmmakers, or also to other film projects which have similar topics. But again, I don't want to say the political attacks on film projects like these are very, very, very serious. And again, a very high dark number of projects are not getting made because people are getting scared, rightfully so, and decide to stop their project.
Havana, if someone watches your film, we can see the kind of security measures that are taken, like we can guess the kind of security measures that are taken by the organization. But you're not part of Love, Not Hate. How was it for you as a filmmaker to work under those circumstances? And can you relate to what Franz was saying?
Yeah, definitely can relate. And it's interesting making a film in the West. I've always made films where you travel and you're going. I've made films in Afghanistan and the Balkans and places where the front lines are clear and in the headlines, and you imagine that the West is somehow protected from this kind of fear. And actually, what we saw in ours was a really horrible and terrifying look at how that fear is starting to infiltrate's the wrong word, but get into our institutions, get into our funding organizations, get into the ways where we show and distribute films, and how people are becoming afraid. Even if you don't have an authoritarian government, you still have fear that someone in the far right is going to do something, and then that will start to change the way people are reacting and the way people are willing to show and fund films. So in this film, yeah, Hope Not Hate, they're called Hope Not Hate. I mean, they're under attack the whole time. So they just that's how they live. They live in safe houses. The safety precautions are amazing. For us, we spent a good period of time and I'm very encouraged to hear that you've got systems in place, because it takes a long time to make yourself digitally secure. And anyone in the room who does want to do anything to do with activism in the future, you should start now, taking yourself off Facebook or using numbers and using addresses in different ways, because it's hard once your information is out there to claw it back. So we did all of that. What has been, when the film came out, we were due to premiere at the London Film Festival. We just had the riots in the UK that were big news last year, the far-right riots. And 2 weeks before our premiere, the London Film Festival, which is an enormous, big, well-funded red carpet event, pulled the film and stopped our premiere because they said it was too dangerous to show. So that was like the first kind of like big shock to us that happened, because, you know, that's already stopping audiences based on a decision made from fear. And fear, I think, is almost as pernicious or as dangerous as actually people making threats. No one had even made a real threat. That was just fear that they might make a threat. We're now trying to make new films. A film that was in development for a long time. In the UK, our system is that you pretty much usually try and raise money in America for funding as well. The Trump effect has had an instant impact on the funding of films. Anything, again, overtly political, we just haven't been able to raise the cash. Sometimes it's because they're too afraid, like PBS, that they're being attacked by Trump. But also investors see what happened in London Film Festival, see what's happening and think, oh, well, maybe the film won't even get distribution. So then they're reluctant to invest. So it's a difficult landscape at the moment.
Just a side note, PBS is the public broadcaster in the US, for anyone who didn't know that. I didn't for a long time. Friedrich, I mean, you work on surveillance and power for quite a long time now. It's not your first film. I think what Havana just tipped is the change in the political sphere is huge. How do you see that it changed over the time, and now with the change in politics in the US, what is your feeling for the future for investigative documentaries?
Well, first of all, I'm not doing investigative documentaries myself, so that's a totally different position, because I'm more looking into the systemic problems. So I'm more into big picture films, like connecting dots that are out there and people usually don't see. What I can say regarding the distribution of my film, we have been in talks. So my film features prominently scenes from January 6th. And we are having difficulty in getting this film out in America for obvious reasons. I mean, we've been talking to major streamers, we've been talking to other distributors, and for parts since November, since the American film market, which is like the equivalent to the European film market here in Berlin at Berlinale, or the Cannes film market. And I think we need to have different and new approaches to release strategies, because there is an audience for these films out there, and they know it. And especially also young people are interested in also difficult subjects, because they want to get they want to be challenged in their views of reality. And this is what these kind of films are doing. In terms of funding, I think, yes, we have to rely more on the European funding system. I think these heydays of American streaming money are over, because at the end of the day, they are corporations who serve mainly their investors and corporate interests. So they have a lot to lose if they go against the American government, for example. In terms of the risk, one way is to make yourself invisible. The other way is to be as vocal and loud about what you're doing as you can. And this was my strategy when I did my film about corruption at the NSA, which was a film called A Good American. I think it should be on Prime. Currently, it used to be on Netflix. And you will and that one exposes corruption at the NSA. So at the time, I was very scared when I made it, because I had heard all the stories from Laura Poitras when she was doing the Snowden story, and my film is sort of the prequel to the Snowden stories. And I decided to be very vocal, and I never had found any sort of intimidation. But again, I'm not an investigative filmmaker, so yeah.
I found it in a way investigative. I know you don't like that word so much, but it gives depth, and you're looking into topics from various points.
True, but it's not like going undercover.
No,
and I think that's a really different subject here, because I'm not on the front line. I'm like in the I know, in headquarters or the situation room, so to say, looking at the overall picture, which is a really different position to be in.
We talked quite a lot about US filmmakers, but you're working with protagonists, in particular Havana and France, who are putting themselves, by being in the film, on the very front line, exposing themselves a lot. How do you work with the responsibility? Where are ethical boundaries for you, where you as a filmmaker decide, okay, that's going to be too dangerous for them? And how do you balance the urge to tell the story versus the responsibility towards them? I don't know who wants to start.
So Hope Not Hate, it took a long time for me to get access to Hope Not Hate. It's the first time they've ever let a filmmaker follow their work. So they're incredibly experienced in terms of what they do, for how many years they've done it, blah, blah, blah. So they made the decision to be filmed with full knowledge of the potential risks. Ultimately, the risks are going to be that they're doing the investigation, whatever. The true risks are going to be there whether they're filmed or not, actually, because they're still exposing people who are going to hate them, some of which are tech billionaires with a lot of money for lawyers, and some of whom are like street thugs who can throw bricks and worse. And that's going to happen really regardless of whether the film happens. The film obviously makes it public, but for them the risk of that was not that much more compared to the risk. The enemies they're making are still the enemies. They're going to make that whether it's on camera or not. But also there's a lot of things that you don't see in the film. So there's lots of decisions that we make about how we show the tech of how they put the camera on and how they organize, but there are things that we didn't expose to do with their systems and how their protocols and how they work, and that was always in discussion with them as to what we could show and what wasn't. So yeah, they came into it with they're very experienced. It did take a long time for us to persuade them that we wouldn't put the mission at risk by being too noisy with the camera or something. I mean, we were very discreet with our filming too.
In the film, it also seems like that you film in private spaces. Were there actually private spaces, or did you use setups so that nobody could relocate where the protagonists are? Did you take any safety measures like that? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, so we did always, you couldn't film, especially Harry, who's the main guy who goes undercover. Obviously, we couldn't film with him on the street. We couldn't walk with him, following him down the street, making him obvious. There's a lot of hotel rooms. I mean, when he's on a mission, it's genuine spy work. So he's flying to Athens, he's flying to Estonia, he's flying to Warsaw. We are in his hotel room before and after, when he goes and when he comes back. We're in taxis with him. And at the same time, he has a handler. The handler is trying to take pictures of Harry in the thing so that they have proof that they really met, that he met the protagonist, the offending people. So there's quite a lot of us filming the handler, trying to film Harry in this sort of strange system. But anyway, we were all hiding behind trees. in lampposts. It was quite funny.
Franz, for you, the setup was quite different. You were filming young activists, most likely without huge organizations behind them. How did you handle the risk for them, and did you put some measures in place to protect them?
So I think with our film, you can break it down into 3 underlying steps, which is trust, time, and contract. You've just said they didn't have any huge organizations behind them, which is true. We also didn't. And the reason I'm saying this is because when we were out there in Hong Kong, for example, with us as a team, the protagonists were directly in contact with the decision makers, if you know what I mean. So there was no studio boss behind us who might use the material in a completely different way, or there was no, I don't know, broadcaster behind us who put us under enormous pressure to film something as quickly as possible. We were aware about a very tragic case around 3 years before we made Dear Future Children, so that must have been around 2018, where a German reporter team did some filming in Hong Kong, filmed activists doing something illegal when it comes to law, local law there, and then that material was used by the prosecution service in Hong Kong to charge them. So that's obviously the worst case scenario that can possibly happen. And a lot went wrong there. And unfortunately, the reporters were never really taken into any responsibility for that. So we were very aware, and the protagonists as well were very aware of that huge failure that happened just a few years before. So when we went there, we wanted to make sure, and that's the second point, that we have enough time with them. We had nearly 4 months with each of the protagonists on the ground. And during that time, we were able to inform them very, very precisely about our plans with the project, what this will mean for them, what it will mean for their future, perhaps. And we also had external and independent people coming in and giving them another explanation of what all of this project, of what that will mean for them, and what the possible, what a festival release, what a cinema release, what a streaming release might mean for them. And then the third thing we did is a unusual contract. Why unusual? Obviously, it's very, very common to have a contract with these protagonists, but in our specific case, all 3 protagonists had the right to completely pull out of the project up to 6 months after filming, which is obviously a relatively long time, which obviously put us as a film team in a certain risky position, because we didn't know if we were able to use that material at all. But on the flip side, during the filming process, and then also during the early steps of pre-production and post-production, the protagonists always knew, I will see the film, I will see the rough cuts, and me pulling out of the film is one message away. Which I think at the time of the filming gave them a certain, a real feeling of security, because that was all temporary. We then informed them very, very closely about the rough cut scenarios. We showed them obviously the film and the materials. We also always asked them for their input and feedback. By that time, we've spent so much time together and worked so closely together that these conversations are almost not worth mentioning, because they were not, obviously none pulled out of the film, and they didn't really have any major concerns, because I think we were trying to capture it as truthfully as possible. And then with the Hong Kong storyline specifically, we did go sort of an extra mile there to protect them individually with some tools, but maybe we'll speak about that later on, because that, I think, is another discussion.
Yeah, I think the informed consent approach that you took there is very beautiful. Just to say that it's for any of you who are maybe not that deep into the documentary film business, there's a huge discussion going on how to inform your protagonists, how to work with them, how much effort you take to explain exactly what being in the film means to them. You can read quite a lot online about that. It's also huge discussions in NGOs for using pictures, so it would be a complete conversation for a new panel. But you kind of opened the door to a second part of our conversation. Everywhere around us, we talk about artificial intelligence, and most of the time it's about how it is frightening, how it's scary, but it also has some very beautiful, nice effects. And as you teased us on that, did you use it, and how did you protect the Hong Kong protagonist?
So I'll try to be as brief as possible. Again, following up on that failure example I've said earlier today, or just now. Why was that such a big problem that this German TV channel that you all know published a big piece about Hong Kong and didn't touch the material before? Because if any one of you would work for the prosecution services in Hong Kong, you could see that material and can say, brilliant, these filmmakers have done our job. They've just filmed the activists doing something illegal, saying something illegal, breaking all different sorts of laws, and that's just the material just there. We can just use it, that's proof. And they did exactly that. They've sent an email, an official email, but from a different organization, to that production company behind it and asked, that material that you've used there, obviously, that was filmed during this and these dates, during these and these dates. The production company activated the trap, thought this is perhaps a media inquiry, and sent a letter back, a signed letter, and saying, yes, exactly right, we were filming that this and this and this at this location during these dates, etc., etc. So they were really signing the grave for all the people that they were filming there. So you can imagine, I'm not trying to exaggerate, but you can imagine what a big embarrassment that was and how much we had to then repair and rebuild when we first arrived there. We obviously didn't want to do that same mistake. And at the same time, we didn't really want to feature these Hong Kong protagonists who are so powerful, and these activists there, obviously what they are saying, what they're thinking, what they're doing is so, so important. We didn't want to follow that same route. And we also didn't want to only show them as completely anonymized people, right? Because we've seen that before. I think from a filmmaking perspective, that doesn't really work. So again, that collaboration with Harvard and Stanford came to help there, and we've asked them, how can we make sure that we are filming all of this, but at the same time are protecting everybody in the film? Because sure, the protagonist itself, they might say, you can just publish this, I will flee Hong Kong anyways, so I won't be able to be traced, I won't be able to be touched anyways. But there's so much going on in the background. I mean, the moment you are filming a larger total shot of the protests, there are, I don't know, 500 people, 1,000 people, and let's say 10 of them are doing something illegal. And if 2 of them are already being looked after and searched after by the prosecution services, you can imagine how that stacks up. So, the solution. We've spoken with them and we've said we don't really want to, I mean, as soon as we film the material, we need to have a really clear strategy on how to make that unusable for the prosecution services. And the solution there that we came up with was a sort of reversed deepfake technology. What is a reverse deepfake technology? So you've all seen reverse deepfake technology today because you've seen this little extract from our film. It basically works like this. You're filming something. Let's say I would film this audience here, and there is a certain technology that you can activate which basically deletes the entire image, the entire frame, and then rebuilds it. And it rebuilds it with a small pixel failure rate. So the image that is then created is not the same as it was before. Now you can say from a filmmaking perspective it is absolutely the same because none of you would see any difference. If I would show you the before and after, you wouldn't be able to spot the difference. But the image is not real anymore. And the image cannot be used for any facial recognition services. The image cannot be used for any proof or any bad ideas that you might have as a prosecution service. That technology was not used during the post-production, but it was used pretty much immediately after each filming day, because obviously there was the small risk that people might stop us on the ground and demand the material to be handed over. So we didn't even have the time to wait until post-production, which made it slightly more complicated, and that, you know, were a lot of work hours there. But that was our approach to tackling that issue. I do hope that this explanation made a lot of sense and is not completely confusing.
It did make a lot of sense. Friedrich, you look into artificial intelligence and you look into different ways how technique is influencing us. And if you hear that story, is it already tampering with truth, or is it just a very good way to protect truth and to protect the sources?
I think, again, the tools of filmmaking and the principles of journalism are going together here. And one of the principles of journalism is protecting your sources and methods. At the same time, you would have a track record for your investors and the broadcasters involved to prove that what you filmed was genuine and true. So it's based on fact. On the other hand, you are interrupting the traceability based on metadata that leads from the published image to the original image. And I think that's a fair practice. Also being vocal about it, so saying, yes, I did this. If you would not be vocal about it, I would see it as something really risky. And I think we, as the documentary filmmakers, are sort of the organic farmers of filmmaking in the future, because we will need to have a seal and a sort of record that shows that we have been working with authentic material from the very beginning of the process to the very end of the process. And there needs to be a traceability in the metadata to prove that we have not doctored images and that we have not used AI. Or if we use AI, it needs to be shown. There needs to be a stamp somewhere, a watermark somewhere on the picture that says AI modified. And then we can argue that this has been done for a reason. But I think in the coming age of AI, and you all will see these video clips from VO3 that are out there now, where you have, I saw one just like a day or two ago of a car show with interviews where everything was fake, nothing of that was real. It was all just AI generated. That's the future that we have. That's actually not the future. That's the present time that we have, in which we are finding ourselves, and that's the visual environment in which we are finding ourselves. And I think there needs to be a way of proving that what we are doing is different from that AI-generated content.
And I think now we had the wonderful round from Havana doing the investigation where everything was proof to how we use it in technology. So as we have just a few minutes left, I wanted to give the opportunity to the audience. There is a question, there is supposed to be a microphone in the room. Maybe, yes, no? I'm not.
Just give me mine.
Yeah, I was, danke.
Thank you so much. You know, my question might be a little bit off topic, but I'm so fascinated by you guys, like you did something a lot of us would love to do, like you're obviously the greatest on the documentary, kind of. This is so cool. And there are so many young people like in the room, and you know, as someone who wants to start in documentary filmmaking, the times are really kind of dystopian. Like everyone tells you, don't do it. There is no money. You won't earn anything. You would do so much work, and there are not a lot of people that would like watch your documentary. And it's pretty hard, like to get into it. And do you have any suggestions? How did you overcome like the start of? Yeah.
How did you start in documentaries? Just a side note, fun fact: at the festival in 2 weeks, we are going to have a panel on how to not earn on documentaries. So it's a huge issue. But how did you three end up in documentaries and make a living from it?
Okay, it's very different though. I mean, 20 years ago, it was a different landscape, a different way. Just for now, I mean, I did the traditional route, started as a researcher, assistant producer, director. But for now, I would say the thing that there is really needed is I'm looking at our traditional documentaries and the audiences we get and how it's distributed, and we are failing to get our films out properly into the world, into the real world audiences. I'm lucky if I get 2 million views on a British TV channel. The far right, Tommy Robinson, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a big far right thug in the UK. He gets 130 million views on his things. So like, how can we move from that to that? And I'm continually saying, okay, I want to make my film, like how can I make short clips? How can I get it onto TikTok? I know nothing about TikTok, right? I don't understand it. I can't watch it. It's just terrible. But that is how they're doing. That is what the far right are doing. And so we've got to try and copy what they're doing to make our stuff as powerful and as seen, I think. Copy their methods. And I really think young people can do that. I can't do it. But I think there are young people who should be able to and could find new ways of finding progressive audiences, but in these new platforms, because the old platforms are not necessarily working. And so I'm quite excited and inspired by the new possibilities out there. It's just every time I say it to like Channel 4 or the BBC or whoever, they're like, well, we don't do it like that. You're like, yes, but the far right are doing like that. They've done it like that for 10 years. That's why they get 100 million views and we get 2. So to me, that's the future, I think.
Do you would like to add something? I love the plaidoyer.
I beg to disagree. First, I produced a film which is called Flash Wars. German title or subtitle is KI im Krieg, and you will find it on the Arte Mediathek, but also on YouTube. And on the Arte YouTube channel, after 1 year that it has been out, we have had over 5 million views in Germany and France alone, and we are just catering to a different audience. And I think we should not try to copy the Timmy Robinsons of this world, or the, I don't know, there's a German AfD guy who's very, and also a Chinese spy who is very literate at this.
Austrian also.
And then in Austria also we have our FPO who is very literate at this. I think this is for the other political groups to copy it. I think there is room for documentaries. I think there is room for user-generated content. I think there's room for content creators. What we should be grounded in is factual evidence and the facts and truthfulness. I think that's it. This is what differentiates us from them. And I think also in terms of the styles of our films, we are very different. So we are catering to different audiences, but what connects us is being based on facts and on the truth. And I think this is what it makes. My entry into documentary was journalism, into which I got totally by chance. So I have a degree in contemporary history and German studies, Geschichte, Germanistik. Worked as a teacher for a year, then by chance became a TV journalist at a very crappy regional television in the Alps. If you have seen How I Met Your Mother, that kind of TV. And then there I did my first documentaries, and I saw that I loved doing it. And then after 2 years, I got away from this TV channel and created my own company and have been producing and directing documentaries ever since. So there are many different ways. I think, if you are interested in a subject, and if you're interested in telling stories, and if you're interested in journalistic principles, documentary is the thing for you. And if you're interested in film and filmmaking.
Yeah, I can also, I can only agree with that. I also started in the film industry without any major connections or contacts in that way. Started at a very young age. I think across Europe, but also in Germany, there are lots of really great opportunities of either working directly on film projects as a runner and as an assistant and learning on the ground. There are also the more traditional routes of going to a film school or going to a university that offers film classes. When it comes to documentary filmmaking more specifically, I would say there is a real hunger, as you can probably tell also from this panel, for also young people getting into documentaries and producing and manufacturing and directing the important work. By the way, I would disagree with the other people that you've spoken to, that it's a difficult time to get into. Sure, it's always difficult, it's never easy. But I, as a young filmmaker as well, have found the most amazing people in the film industry, and I think it's one of the coolest industries to work in. And I think one of the many reasons for that is because I think there are only very few other industries where people from such different backgrounds come together to work on the same project. That perhaps is even more the case with fictional filmmaking, where you have even more departments, but it's also the case with documentary directing, and often that overlaps anyways. So also don't really wait for anyone to give you permission to enter that industry. I think it would be a great way. Would be nice to have you join us.
We are unfortunately at the end of the time. We will be in the on-screen space right on the opposite of this room for further Q&A questions. If you want to see Havanas or Friedrich's films, you're very much invited to join us at Documentaire in 2 weeks. We start on June 11th, and we will also host industry discussions like this. So be welcome, and Franz, really beautiful, amazing film you will find on Arte and ARD, and you will find us just in a second over there to answer more questions. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for inviting us. It was a pleasure.